Top 20 oil-producing countries in Africa 2022. Oil is one of the most fundamental and important resources in the modern world since it is necessary for the manufacturing of gasoline, diesel fuel, jet fuel, and many other items. Barrels per day are used to quantify oil production. The majority of oil-producing nations produce thousands, even millions of barrels per day, with their overall output frequently being constrained by market factors rather than their ability to produce oil. Africa is one of the richest continents in the world when it comes to natural resources like crude oil. If you want to know the top 20 oil-producing countries in Africa, stay with me to the end of this video, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. We begin with 20. Malawi, 200 barrels per day. Only 200 barrels of oil are produced daily by Malawi, which is ranked among the world's oil producers and last among the top 20 oil producers in Africa. One of the world's poorest nations, Malawi, has reason to be hopeful given the possibility of significant oil resources under Lake Malawi. The potential wealth from oil production in Malawi might support the country's agriculture-based economy. Major oil production is anticipated in Malawi, but the country's administration must make sure that it is a blessing rather than a disaster for its citizens. 19. Morocco, 5,100 barrels per day. It is among the first 100 largest oil-producing countries in the world and is recognized as the 19th richest oil-producing nation in Africa. Morocco is praised for its highly developed oil infrastructure and its 5,100 barrels per day of production. The major cities with the required amenities are close to the major pipelines, seaports, airports, and roads. The administration has made numerous attempts to increase the nation's capacity for oil production. The majority of its reserves, particularly those in sedimentary basins, have not yet been explored. Thus, authorities have started immediate exploration efforts. 18. Mauritania, 6,000 barrels per day. In terms of global oil production, Mauritania ranks 95th overall and 18th in Africa. At the Chinguetti oil field in Mauritania, oil was found in 2001. Since February 2006, when oil production first began, Mauritania has been producing roughly 6,000 barrels per day. The estimated 600 million barrels per day crude oil reserves in Mauritania are projected to add to the country's economy, which is now dominated by the mining sector, which accounts for around 25% of GDP. 17. Niger, 20,000 barrels per day. The Republic of Niger is listed amongst the largest oil-producing countries in the world and the 17th greatest producer of oil in Africa. The Republic of Niger, which ranks 4th in the world for uranium production, started producing oil in 2011. 1 billion barrels of oil are thought to be in the reserves, and by 2016, output was able to reach 80,000 barrels per day. The country intends to export about 60,000 barrels per day after the second phase of development of the Agaden block, which is finished and running the way it should. The current oil output is used domestically. 16. DRC Congo, 20,000 barrels per day. The DRC is ranked 78th globally and 16th among African nations that produce oil. With 180 million barrels of confirmed crude oil reserves, DR Congo has the second largest oil reserves in southern Africa. Since the DR Congo lacks a refinery, it must import refined petroleum products and export crude oil, which accounts for a sizable portion of the country's foreign profits. Daily oil production is roughly 20,000 barrels. 15. Côte d'Ivoire, 37,000 barrels per day. Crude oil production for Côte d'Ivoire was 37,000 barrels per day in July 2022. Production of crude oil in Côte d'Ivoire decreased at a decreasing rate between August 2021 and July 2022, falling from 37,000 barrels per day in August 2021 to 36,000 barrels per day in July 2022. Côte d'Ivoire is one of the largest oil-producing nations in West Africa and the 15th largest oil producer in Africa. It produces approximately 37,000 barrels per day, which makes it the 66th largest producer of oil in the world. The government expects its energy drive to boost oil production to 200,000 barrels a day by 2023. 14. Tunisia, 59,000 barrels per day. With a daily production capacity of 59,000 barrels, Tunisia ranks as the 61st greatest oil producer in the world and among the first 20 largest oil producers in Africa. Near its border with Algeria, in the El Borma oil field, Tunisia discovered oil in 1964. The oil sector in Tunisia is governed by the Ministry of Industry, and Société Nationale de Distribution du Pétrole distributes and markets the oil. Tunisia has proven reserves equivalent to 12.0 times its annual consumption. This means that without net exports, there would be about 12 years of oil left at current consumption levels, and excluding unproven reserves. 13. Cameroon, 59,610 barrels per day. In July 2022, production of crude oil from Cameroon was 59,610 barrels per day. Production of crude oil of Cameroon fell gradually from 62.78 thousand barrels per day in August 2021 to 59,610 barrels per day in July 2022. Cameroon's daily output is anticipated to reach 150,000 barrels. Despite having limited reserves of just 200 million barrels per day, the nation intends to increase its refining capacity by establishing a new refinery to serve its oil-rich neighbors Angola and Nigeria. 12. Chad, 68,000 barrels per day. Chad is among the biggest oil-producing countries in Africa. Oil production in Chad began in 2003 after the completion of the pipeline connecting Chad to the Atlantic Ocean via Cameroon. Despite having 1 billion barrels of reserves, Chad's oil output has declined from last year. It is projected to 68,000 barrels per day in 2022, a substantial decrease from 2021's 109,000 barrels per day. Major operators like ExxonMobil and Shell continue to advance development in the Doba Basin, where most of Chad's petroleum is produced. 11. Equatorial Guinea, 88,000 barrels per day. Equatorial Guinea's production is projected to 88,000 barrels per day in 2022, a considerable decrease from 153,000 barrels per day levels in 2021. The Ministry of Mines and Hydrocarbons is concentrating on enhancing exploration and resuming production throughout significant basins to overcome this decline. In this regard, the Zafiro, Jade and Serpentina facilities are undergoing repair, and fresh exploration campaigns are beginning. Trident Energy and the partners for Block G have also had their production sharing agreement extended. Hello there! If you're still watching till now, then I guarantee you that the first country on this list will shock you. Don't forget to subscribe, turn on the notification bell and give this video a thumbs up as we quickly round up this list. 10. South Sudan, 156,000 barrels per day. Most of the oil production capacity is now in South Sudan after it gained its independence from Sudan in 2011, but it has to use Sudan's export pipelines and port, which makes the two countries dependent. Unified Sudan was the second largest non-OPEC oil producer in Africa before they split in 2011. The division has led to a decline in oil production for both countries. They are now ranked as the fourth largest non-OPEC African oil producer. The amount of crude oil produced by South Sudan in July 2022 was 156,000 barrels per day. Despite significant fluctuations in recent months, South Sudan's crude oil production generally increased from August 2021 to July 2022, reaching a peak of 156,000 barrels per day in July 2022. 9. South Africa, 160,000 barrels per day. In terms of global oil production, South Africa ranks 41st overall and is the 9th largest oil producer in Africa. It produces about 160,000 barrels per day. Only 15 million barrels of confirmed crude oil reserves are present in South Africa, and as oil fields deteriorate, so does the country's crude oil output. The two main advantages of South Africa's oil sector are its huge economy and well-developed infrastructure. It has the second largest capacity for crude oil refining in Africa. 8. Ghana, 172,000 barrels per day. Oil has undoubtedly grown to be one of Ghana's main economic drivers over time. Since the previous few decades, the nation's oil and gas industry has undergone a significant transformation. In 2007, the country made its first deep-water oil and gas discovery. Despite this, and perhaps more so because the country's hydrocarbon sector is still relatively young, oil has grown to be one of the nation's most valued exports and a significant contributor to GDP. Ghana is the 8th largest oil producer in Africa, with around 660 million barrels of proven oil reserves. The two oil fields that contribute the most to production are Jubilee and Tweneboa-Enyenran-Tome. And as an offshore basin investment rises and new projects, including the deepwater Tano Cape 3 point managed by ACRE come online, production is anticipated to rise up to 420,000 barrels per day in 2023. 7. Gabon, 195,000 barrels per day. Gabon's oil production has dropped since reaching a peak of 370,000 barrels per day in 1997. 2022 production forecasts predict a daily output of 195,000 barrels per day. The country is currently devoted to enhancing exploration and raising output, which can be largely ascribed to aging oil fields and a lack of investment. Gabon wants to entice investment and growth through changes made to the Hydrocarbon Code in 2019, which have strengthened the regulatory framework's flexibility. 6. Republic of Congo, 275,000 barrels per day. The Congo anticipates a steady rise in production as new fields come online. Moho Bilondo, the first deep-water field to be developed in the nation, has sparked fresh interest in producing fields and increased production in Congo. Additionally, Zenith Energy obtained a 25-year license to keep running the Tilapia oil field, which began in 2021. And as exploration picks up across the nation, the prognosis for production is promising. 5. Egypt, 556,440 barrels per day. With a projected 556,440 barrels per day of oil production in 2022, Egypt occupies the 5th rank as Africa's top oil producer. The nation is trying to improve exploration with a focus on drilling new wells as demand from European markets increases. The nation inked 84 petroleum agreements with foreign companies between 2014 and 2020, and it plans to expand exploration even more this year, 2022. 4. Libya, 946,000 barrels per day. Despite having 46.4 billion barrels of the continent's largest proven oil reserves, Libya's production has fallen off dramatically due to political unrest and a lack of oil field upkeep. The nation produced about 1.17 million barrels per day in 2021, but production has decreased as the political climate has gotten worse. Due to normal infrastructure and export blockades, production in 2022 is especially vulnerable. Once political stability has been restored, there is hope that output levels will increase again. 3. Algeria, 970,000 barrels per day. Algeria is determined to raise an output above pre-pandemic levels of 1.3 million barrels per day, making it the 3rd largest oil producer in 2022. Production is forecast to be 970,000 barrels per day in 2022, up from 874,000 barrels in 2021. The North African nation, which has the 2nd largest proven oil reserves on the continent with upwards of 12 billion barrels, is dedicated to maximizing reserves through stepping up exploration and investments. Number 2. Nigeria, 1.02 million barrels per day. Nigeria produced about 1.02 million barrels per day in May 2022, falling to the second largest producer on the continent from 1.3 million barrels per day. According to current projections, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC's members, anticipate that the peak production would occur in 2023, with offshore projects accounting for 65% of the nation's output levels in 2022. Production decreases are to be anticipated starting in late 2023 until deep-water projects like the Bongo field, which is expected to attract $10 billion in additional investment and add 150,000 barrels per day to domestic supply, come online. And finally, the first on the list is Angola, 1.16 million barrels per day. The largest oil producer in Africa is now Angola, surpassing Nigeria. With non-oil reserves for over 9 billion barrels, Angola is dedicated to maximizing the potential of its hydrocarbon industry. Production is observed at 1.16 million barrels per day in 2022, but as the country's 6-year licensing period and policy reforms get going, this number is expected to rise. For 2022, fresh exploration campaigns and asset maximizing also portend a new era of growth. Having heard all that, we believe you have learned a thing or two about the top 20 oil-producing countries in Africa. What are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comment section. If you'd love to learn more about Africa, subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Thanks for watching.